Our guest today is a horror, mystery, and tabletop enthusiast creating some of the best tabletop content around. She runs a YouTube channel where she delves into advice on how to run and play games, as well as produces some great horror and mystery one-shots. It's Val from Corkboards and Curiosity. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi. You set me up for so much expectations with that intro. Oh my god. Hi.
No, we mean it. It's a tough landscape out there. I feel like there's been an explosion lately of just like in the past 5 years, everyone is getting into tabletop games, and a lot of people are writing them, and a lot of people are running games. And I've played in some games lately that have been not so great. So I'm thinking a lot lately about like how lucky I am to live in sort of a time where if I want to get better at running games or if I want to run really fun stuff, I can just look it up online. And I can, YouTube or Reddit or whatever, I can find great stuff to run.
You gotta go through like a little share of like bad games for a time, because it also helps you get good, right? It's just like sometimes you just like build things in a contrast. Be like, you see something like, I don't like this. Now I know that I don't like this. This is great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you develop your taste a little bit too. I'm looking back and thinking that the games that I didn't like 5, 6 years ago, maybe they were good games and they just weren't for me.
Yeah.
I've already gotten this off script. I apologize. So, Val, thanks for being here this evening for
Thank
you.
you
We
for
appreciate it
having
very
me.
much. We were watching a bunch of your videos, and then we have actually for years, or at least a year, but this week in particular, just kind of getting ready to things. And I was trying to think, like, you have such a distinctive um, style, like a visual style of what it seems your games are about. How did you get into this in the first place, into tabletop games in general?
Into tabletop. I got my first game when I was in high school. But I think I've always liked like fantasy and everything and escapism in general. But I had my first game when I was in high school, loved it, and then immediately proceeded to run a few games for my friends, even though I didn't know anything about running games or anything about D&D. And it was like, I don't know what D&D is, so I'm just going to like pretend that I'm playing D&D, and I made some like pretend system that was just like a simplified version of what I remembered from that one time I played. And that was great. But I got most seriously into it in college, and then quickly played like 3 games a week,
Yeah.
every week, forever.
No, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And you can do that in college too. Yeah, a couple nights a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So was it always that kind of like mystery, intrigue, heavy on the story, narrative stuff? Has that always been your style?
No, I
I'm
think
surprised to hear that.
yeah, I mean, I've always liked mystery and horror in general. Well, that's a lie. I don't. For someone who plays a lot of horror, I don't actually consume that much horror content. But I think this is something that I've come to appreciate more and more as I get more experience, both as a GM and as a player, mostly, and realize what I like about the game, because it takes some time, like, to figure that out about yourself. And now I know that in TTRPG, what I most look for is emotional involvement, and horror and mystery are really good for that. Because even if I don't have, like, most often I get my emotional involvement from just like through the character, but in horror and mystery, you inherently have it through the emotions of fear and intrigue and curiosity, and it's really nice. It's cool. I like it. But it wasn't always necessarily the case, I guess. Yeah, it's gotten more the case as I learn more and more what I like about the game and what I like about TTRPG in general.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
use this word in one of your videos. You talk about the players being obsessed, right? Obsessed with the world. And I think, they're playing a character that is not yourself, but you can kind of imagine yourself being in that situation. It feels to me like fear is like a really, really great way to get people obsessed or involved in the world. It's such a strong
It
emotion.
really is.
Any kind of like negative or like uneasiness and curiosity and stuff. What about like happy, bright, sunshine stuff? Do you feel like we can get players involved with that kind of emotion too?
I think you can. I mean, it depends on the players, yeah. Because I mean, for me, it's definitely. I'm one of those players when I'm a player, and also when I'm a GM. I also like to do that to my players. But I'm one of those people who is very much playing with the philosophy of "fuck me up, GM." And so I love the tragedy of it. I love like characters suffering and all of that, because I think that makes a fun story. But not every player is like that, and some players are like, I like creating chaos, I like fun scenes, and that just really depends on the player. Really, for me, it's I like it. I like the tragedy. I like the drama of it. I like conflict, but you can definitely engage players with more light-hearted things and with humor and all of that. I just suck at it because I don't have a sense of humor. So I scare people instead. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying absolutely you can do that, but just I don't
Yeah,
do that. Is that
absolutely.
right?
Yeah,
You can
okay.
absolutely do that, but play to your strength, and my strength is not that. Yeah.
So how did you figure out what your strength was then? Because I think there's a lot of people who are maybe beginner, they've just started running games, or they've been for a year or so, and they're trying to figure out what their particular favorite genre is, or they're like, I'm really excited about the game. I think it takes a while to get to that point. Even if you're having a great time, maybe you don't feel like you're totally great at it yet until you find your thing. How did you find your thing? Was it a game you were playing or running? You just looked around and realized that you liked it, or were you like deliberately trying things?
Yeah, kinda. I mean, it just happened like by like randomly for me, by just trying to play with a different group of people, and then suddenly my eyes were open. I was like, oh, this is the first time I'm playing Masks. I played D&D
Oh,
for a very, very long time. I still play D&D, still really like D&D. It will always have a special place in my heart because it's the first game I played, and I played only that for a very long time. And then the first game that I played that was in D&D was Masks: A New Generation, which I don't know if you've played that. It's really good. It's nice.
we have
Read it,
actually
but I haven't
recently.
played it.
It's lovely.
Wait, didn't you
I
play with
love
me,
it.
Tristan?
Masks? No,
Were
I
you
wasn't
there?
there. I wasn't there.
Oh, ooh, yikes!
What the
It was
hell,
fun.
man?
It was good. Yeah, I thought you were there. Yeah, this was like a couple months ago.
Did you like it?
Sorry. Yeah, I did. I had a good time. I tried to play like sort of the straight man character, right? We had a lot of zany stuff going on. It can be very silly. And I was trying to play like young sidekick Robin style, just to stand up, just sort of a foil for the rest of the players. And that ended up being sort of the most fun that I think I possibly could have had in that
That's
role, because
amazing.
there's just ridiculous stuff going on in the game. We were inside a giant toaster. I don't remember the circumstances. Yeah.
See, that's the kind of shit that I love. Like, just,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
a toaster. But it's for me, Masks. Like, I mean, Masks was like a big game, and for me, just even if I don't play it a lot those days, but it's just it was the first game that I tried that wasn't it. But mostly, I think if you don't know what you like, sometimes it's just because you don't know what the options are and what options are available to you. And I had played very much like heroic fantasy for a very long time, and then suddenly I found myself in a game and in a group and in a system that was very RP and drama focused. And I mean, Masks has all these mechanics to kind of, like it's a coming of age game, and the mechanics are built around that. And it's inherently it's inherently like trying to make you think about your character's evolution and their feelings and all of that. And I hadn't really had that for a really long time, and I didn't know it was an option. And then suddenly it was, and so it's the first game that I tried that just kind of like opened this whole can of worms of there's so much more to TTRPG than what I've been doing so far as a player and as a GM, and suddenly I'm just throwing myself into a whole variety of different games to try and figure out all of those options that are on the market and see what I can kit bash into my own sort of style. So horror is definitely a huge part of it. Another part of it is I try to kind of like be the player character's inner voice sometimes, or like sometimes be their intrusive thoughts, which I think is a really fun thing to play with. And little by little, you figure out by trying things and messing up, you realize what you're bad at and how you can compensate for them. Like, I really wanted to have those very intimidating villains, and then realized that I could not just save my life. I could not make a low-pitched voice, intimidating, ominous. So now I play to my strength, and I go, I'm going to make creepy doll voices, and that works. And that's just as
that works
scary.
fine.
Yeah.
You have like
Yeah.
a mean girl villain in the Orchid Heist. Who's like
I
a
love
very
her.
duplicitous. Yeah, that's a great villain. That's a very scary thing to me personally. So you have these ideas, from masks and the emotions that you're playing with. You can bring those to D&D too, though,
Yeah,
right? I
absolutely.
mean, and you can import them to your game once you've experienced it a little bit. What are
Yeah.
some of the things that you think GMs could do to bring that kind of feeling to a game of D&D?
You mean like specific, like emotional involvement, or like just like engagement in general, like, or like horror?
Well, I mean both, because I think I have an idea about what you
Okay.
might say, but yeah, I mean engagement, player engagement in general, identifying strongly with their character, feeling strongly things that their character does. So I think like out of the box D&D does not do a great job of that, right? The masks, like you said, has all these mechanics built around it, like it rewards that kind of thing and it encourages it. And D&D just doesn't have the rule set for that really, but it doesn't mean you
Yeah.
can't do that in the
It
game. It
doesn't mean
just
you
takes some
can't.
work.
I
Yeah.
think D&D is kind of fun in that. I mean, there's a whole debate about like D&D versus other games versus only D&D. Which I get. And while I'm always going to be advocating for try a bunch of different things, because that's what tells you what you like and what tells you what might work in another game. Even if you're eventually going to come back to D&D, that's fine. But D&D is very convenient in that it's broad enough that you can make any kind of story in it, I think. And I'm also the kind of player who can kind of find my fun in any system and any table, just because now I know what I like, so it's easy for me to build bridges. But I think teaching people how to do that and teaching the players at your table how to do that is really interesting. Like, I've had one of the campaigns I'm in as a player is some Mad Max inspired kind of thing in hell, and it's really great. It's very action driven, very combat driven, and I am not really a combat player. I'm really bad at strategy. I suck at making good character builds, and I intentionally nerf my characters so often. And but
You said
so
intentionally? Like,
yeah,
you
absolutely.
can we pull on that just a tiny bit? Like,
Yeah.
what do you mean? I don't
I,
want
I
to derail the
mean,
Mad Max, but
it's just that uh, at some point, like, if I like playing characters who are deeply flawed, and I will always go for drama and personality over mechanics. Or I pick my mechanics, or I pick my abilities for my characters according to just like the flavor of the character, which sometimes means it's not the most optimized decisions, but it's the most, like, the ones that make the most sense for the character. And I'm sorry, give me a second. I've
no,
got.
it's
No,
great.
no
Hi,
need
kitty
to
cat.
apologize.
There we go. Hi,
Oh,
cats.
looks like my cat.
Yeah, it does look. I was just thinking that they can be friends.
He wants to be involved all the time. But yeah, so sometimes I'll make a decision that is just not great, optimization wise, but that's okay, because do it for the plot, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's fun. Yeah, okay, that's
Yeah.
what I thought you meant.
Yeah.
There's this whole kind of tradition of like we used to when we started playing like dungeon crawl games or dungeon crawl classics type stuff. You roll your
Mhm.
stats in order, and you just kind of see what you have,
Yeah.
and then you make a character based on that. I think it's kind of the same idea. You're really leaning into the role of the character and figuring out what they could do. Okay, I'm sorry I interrupted you about Mad
No,
Max and
that's
Hell.
okay.
What was
I mean, there's a limit to it, of course, right? Because like at some point you still want this. I mean, it's still a collaborative game, and the point isn't to just like derail the game. But I think there's like a way to do it and a way to learn to do it that just like brings more to the table rather than derails it. And that's something I like to play with. I don't know, but it's fun. I don't know what I was
yeah.
saying about Mad Max. Yes, I do.
Well, yeah, you were saying that you're not a combat player.
I'm not a combat player. I can like combat, but it takes a bit more effort for me to like combat. But now that I know about myself that I'm very like RP and drama driven, that I just use that to make a bridge to combat. And I just find a reason that RPing through combat is going to be really fun for me. And so now I can really enjoy myself into pretty much any game just because I've learned to build my characters in a way that just builds bridges between the game and what I as a player like, and I can make myself like anything really. So
Yeah,
it's kind of
that's
cool.
Yeah.
that's a super interesting
Yeah.
point because like I feel like there's in you know the vast majority of like GM advice and stuff you find online, like there's this really big emphasis on like the GM providing the fun for their players, which like is important. But like yeah, players should be able to like know what they like, and you know you have to work a little bit to like find your fun and know what works for you and stuff.
Players should learn how to find their own fun, and also players should learn how to engage each other at the table and not have that solely rest on the GM's shoulders. And as much as a GM can do a lot of things to do that, I think like just learning how, or like just building a character in a way that like, how can my character solicit other players? What kind of dynamics can I build with other player characters is in a way that will engage those players as well is just really, really fun and just eventually builds so much better party dynamics as well.
Yeah. Do you have a way that
Yeah.
you do that at your tables, that you encourage it or you make that happen for players? Because you mentioned earlier it's important to teach players how to do, because they're new sometimes, right? Or
Yeah.
inexperienced. How do you teach them to do that?
We have like, I mean, okay, I'm gonna be honest. You said the word obsessed before. I'm not gonna deny it. I talk about the game constantly. So you know, I mean, I'm always throughout the week between sessions. I'm always kind of texting with my friends about the game and about their characters and about my character when I'm a player, and trying to figure out more and more about that. But we also have we have a very extensive like session zero or like preparation to the game where we kind of get a feel of I know some people like to save their character concept as a secret, and it will be like a surprise when it hits the first session, and that's absolutely fine. But I don't really love to do that personally, just because I like to beforehand kind of see how a character is going to slot with others, how they're going to, like what kind of dynamic they can have together, and just kind of start making those connections beforehand, thinking, oh, like your character seems like they could be a really cool like parental figure for mine, or oh, like it seems like there could be some fun rivalry going on between these two characters, and starting to already plant hooks so that the moment game starts we already have something to go off of and already some prompts that are already built into the game before we even start it. And these don't have to be set in stone, because sometimes you start playing and you realize that it's not actually how that dynamic ends up working, and you can always modify them as time goes on or think of new arcs as some concludes. But we just talk about the game so much that we always end up coming up with new ways that characters can relate to each other and to the world.
And it sounds
Yeah.
like if you start the conversation, if you're the one kind of driving the texting throughout the week of like, who
Yeah.
is your character to mind, right? Because there's this idea like you could play D&D like you're playing blackjack, and it's everybody against the dealer, everybody against the
Mm-hmm.
GM, or you could play it like it's Texas Hold'em or something, where all playing with each other and the interactions with each other.
Yeah.
I think that's way more fun.
I think
Like
it's
I'm
really
there
fun.
to hang out with my friends, like I want to hang
Mhm.
out with them.
There's this principle of like in Monster of the Week, another PBTA game which I also really 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 love. They phrase it as there's some core principles for the GM to follow, and one of them is be the character's biggest fan, and I love that. I love the way of thinking of that. It's just I if I'm running a game, I really want to be just really, really willing to see what the characters are going to do, and really wanting to see how their story is going to develop. But that's part of the fun for me, both as a GM and as a player. And again, it's one playstyle among others. Some players are just not going to be interested in that. Some players are going to be more like, I like to think of the game as a puzzle, and I want to think of like strategy and optimization, and all of those playstyles are super valid. That just happens to be mine, and I like just trying to bring that emotional involvement in my players as well. But yeah, a lot of it is just figuring out beforehand what's really like engaging them through the character and what their character is going to be drawn to. But yeah.
We talked a little bit before we started rolling about pre-written content. And I'm curious, do you have a method you try to use to get that engagement if you're running something pre-written? Because it's sometimes it feels like it can. I know we have a lot of people in our community that talk about this, where it can feel trickier to kind of get investment with something where chunks of the setting or like how their character made or something like that is kind of out of their hands.
It's harder. It's
It
harder.
is,
It's not
yeah.
impossible, but it's harder. I'm maybe not the best person to answer that question because all the pre-written adventures that I've been writing them. So I've been
I
like,
knew.
yeah,
Yeah, it doesn't
I've been
really count,
integrating
does
that
it?
Yeah.
stuff. Exactly. Like I've been trying to integrate that stuff into the adventures that I write. Like for example, for the Orchid Heist that we were talking about earlier, like there's a whole like mechanic around the character's main insecurity, and so that comes up later in the game, and that's something that the GM can just like ask their players before the session, try and define that together, and then can pull on them later in the game. And I tried to have that built into my adventures, but again, that's my adventures, and the only module that's a lie. I've run 2 modules that weren't mine. One of
In your
them
life?
was in my life.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting question. We should ask everybody that. How many modules have you written? Have you run that you didn't write?
Yeah,
2.
and one of them was a
Jeez.
one-shot, so...
Counts, yeah.
No, I've probably run some others, but like it's short stuff, you know. I mean, like for example, like there's some like starter like adventures written in the Dread playbook, and so I ran one of those that I didn't count it in, but I guess it counts as well. But the only like big campaign I've tried to run that was a pre-written adventure was Curse of Strahd. It's my cursed campaign. I've never managed to finish running it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on my 3rd attempt. But in that case, it's really just taking a lot of time to make it your own. I've taken a lot of time to make Curse of Strahd my own. I run with a female Strahd also, which changes the entire dynamic. Because if you're going to play with those tropes, the tropes of Dracula is a very, very specific, like, male narrative. Whereas
Yeah.
if you're going to make a female Strahd, then you translating that trope doesn't mean just like simply gender bending Strahd, but for me it meant going with the matron figure and like thinking of that figure in that trope in horror stories. So it's a lot of it needs to be reworked for trying to engage your players in modules like that. I think sadly it's really just a matter of like talking to the players and just like trying to really get into all the nooks and crannies of figuring out what their character is like and trying to see how you can link all of that. But it's such a case by case basis. It's so specific to each
Yeah.
player.
Yeah.
Great if there was some method. And I'm saying this, I don't have anything in mind.
Yeah.
It would be great if there was some method where you could take a
I mean,
pre-written
but the
adventure
moment
and
you say
figure
that,
out.
it means I'm going to start thinking of a method. So, I mean,
Yeah, no, that's
the
good.
moment
That's
you
why-
say it,
that's
it's
what
like,
we're
oh,
here
that's
for.
my next project. I mean, one method that I think is really cool is just like one way of like having like GMs teach that to their players, or just players teach it themselves to like figure out what they like is just trying to have more vocabulary for what we do at the table. Because just saying, oh, it's an RP driven game can mean so many things. Like sometimes for a person, RP driven can mean tragic and just like really pulling on the heartstrings, and like for someone else it can mean like RP means that I want to like do chaotic things and mess with the NPCs, and that's different kinds of fun, but they've been so far both labeled under RP, and that doesn't mean all that much. Just like someone labeling a game as combat driven or like action driven might mean something very different to someone who's looking for like that release and that adrenaline and like just like fuck around and find out, and someone else who's just like again been seeing the game more as a puzzle and wanting to think more in terms of strategy and really optimizing their build and thinking of like, you know, they're very different ways to play, and we just don't have all that vocabulary. So I think figuring out this contrast with players, and maybe one day there needs to be like a full-on list of all of this. I guess we were talking not too long ago with some friends about the the 8 types of players.
Yeah.
Not just in TTRPG, but I think it's initially a thing for video games, and a lot of it rings true in TTRPG players, but doesn't quite fit for some of it.
Yeah, it's
We
not
need
quite
something
right
like
because you have more
that.
freedom. Yeah. They've
Yeah.
tried. I mean, the D&D 4th edition had like player categories. I remember at the
Mm-hmm.
time thinking like, wow, this is amazing. I'm going to apply this to my game right away. And looking back, I don't know that it was actually all that helpful. It really, it's so specific to the person and to the table you're at. I wonder if it's more useful to um, describe the game in the way you were talking about. Like, this is not an RP heavy game. This is a tragic, there's interpersonal conflict. They're, getting like a really juicy, we call it a genre statement. Like what we say,
Mm.
this is in the second book. We're talking about like, when you start a new campaign, sitting down with your players and figuring out like a 7 or 8 word, extremely specific genre that you're going to play is
The
nice. This is
elevator
even before
pitch.
characters. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
elevator pitch, but you
Mm-hmm.
don't even know the synopsis yet. You just know it's like post-apocalyptic, super tragic, heightened reality, mystery.
So and so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
then
That's why I
everyone
need to
makes
get my hands
characters
on the
based
second
on
book.
that. Oh yeah, I don't know where it is right now. It's at a printer somewhere.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get it in.
I had like one random thought, but it's also a half-baked thought, so I don't know. But like,
Great.
Perfect.
like still on the types of players. Like I'm trying to think these days about like there's types of players, and this is gonna relate to teaching. I'm gonna drop some fucking like teaching theory right now.
Great.
But one of my favorite like concepts in pedagogy that I've learned while I was a teacher is something called the stances of teaching, and I mentioned it briefly in a video, but I think it's a concept that needs so much more developing in GMing, because it applies so much to GMing. But the idea being that there's different stances that the teacher takes, which some of them is just like more of a lecturing style, other is more of just like accompanying students who are doing something independently. Something is like they're just different styles of teaching. But the core idea of that isn't that one teacher has a specific style, but rather that one teacher will rotate through all of these stances depending on what the class environment requires right now. And I think GMing is kind of the same thing, where it's not really instead of focusing so much on what like the GM style or the table style is like, I'm trying to think more of like what are the different stances that GMs can switch through and circle through in the game, and at what moment each stance is most interesting. Like for example, like when is railroading appropriate and when is railroading nice because we need to move things along and we have to like master timing, but at another moment something else is going to be more appropriate. So I'm trying to think of like if maybe it's more relevant, instead of thinking of definitive categories that one person stays in, to think more of like what are the different modes you can switch your brain to and when are each of them appropriate.
I really like that.
Uh,
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's moments when you, as the GM, I think need for drama and for excitement, you need to be
yeah
like an adversary. You're playing
yeah
Strahd at the end of Curse of Strahd. You got to be ruthless and dangerous to communicate the proper tone and the atmosphere and the danger. There's also
and
places where you're
especially
just like running the NPC who has the potion stall.
yeah
And, you're just kind of facilitating some kind of mechanical thing. And then there's other times when you want to just sit back and let the players have a conversation around the campfire or
yeah
something and let
Yeah.
that
And
happen.
especially if you're running a genre game like horror, it's like, I mean, everything when you run a game, it's like it's a whole like game of like tension and release. Like you can't have a game that is like full horror or a game that is like full fun or something, because things exist in contrast to each other. So you need to have like these ups and downs. And if you want to make something scary, you need to have something light to contrast it with. And if you want to make something like tense, you need to have something like relaxed to contrast it with. So it's like you need to have so much switching in your GMing and in one session, like within one session, it needs to just be like this, just like this constant like back and forth and like up and down kind of thing. Otherwise, like you don't have, if everything is dark, nothing is dark, you know? So,
Right.
so I like the idea of that, and of thinking less of like definitive styles that one person might have and stick through, and thinking of it more as just different moves or ouch, that was claws into my thigh.
No.
Or different like moves or stances that the GM may adopt at different moments within the session. Yeah.
I think there's an interesting connection there to the structure of a 5-room dungeon, because if you have your 5-room dungeon or your 5-tier dungeon, it feels
Yeah.
like you would need to adopt a different stance as you're moving through that progression naturally. I wonder, that kind of just happens by itself, right? I mean, do you think if the adventure is designed in such a way, I'm just thinking out loud now, like if I'm designing an encounter, and it's a combat encounter versus some kind of complicated social thing, I think I have to adopt a different stance as a GM. And so if I'm making something pre-written or for someone else to run, I'm going to include only details that help reinforce that stance somehow. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Now,
Like if
you got me thinking.
you're thinking about it now too.
Yeah, that would be really useful for pre-written adventures, I think, because you see a lot with like that's something I really like about Orchid Heist is like the it was concise, right? Like my biggest problem with pre-written adventures is like, especially some of I've been reading a bunch of older ones, but they have like these huge blocks of text,
Yeah.
and it's difficult to like find the relevant information, and then sometimes. With some of those really, really pared down adventures, you're like, maybe I want a little bit more, and it's like hard to figure out what you need. But that's interesting. Like if you specify the details you need based on the stance of the encounter that's being written about.
Even just a little
That's-
blurb at the
Yeah.
top, right?
You
Yeah.
know already,
GM,
I'm going to
switch
spend the
stance to
next month
adversarial.
thinking about that. Oh,
Yeah,
God.
yeah.
That's my
Let
next
us know when you
project. Like,
figure it out. Yeah, it'd be great.
I mean, I've been thinking so much about the stances lately. I was like, this can wait a bit longer. I have a couple more videos I want to do first before I do that. And now I think this maybe has moved a bit higher up on the priority list, because now I'm going to not be able to stop thinking about it.
Awesome.
Also, I'm happy you think that about Orchid Heist, because I was worried about that.
Really? Yeah. No, I thought it was
yeah.
great. Yeah.
It's
I
a
appreciate
challenge, I
that.
think, to have a very strict 5-room, 5-tier thing. So I've got a question about that. Like when you, so our community, right, the lab is mostly made of people who've been running games for a while, either like since the 80s or very seriously recently. A lot of them sort of picked up the hobby during the pandemic, and they've run a lot of games since then. So from like an intermediate advanced level, they're thinking about, how am I going to design or write my next adventure? So if you're sitting down to write that the 5-room concise dungeon, what was your thought? Like, which room did you start with? Did you have any beats that you really wanted to hit and you connected them, or did you start at the beginning, go to the end? I'm curious about like the practical aspect of it.
Okay, I need to ask a clarification, because there's two very different questions this could go. Like,
Okay.
are you asking how I'm designing that adventure as someone who's going to run it, or how I'm designing it as someone who's writing it for someone else to run it? Because these are like,
Great,
in my
very
head,
different
there's
question.
Yes,
such different
That's true.
skills.
For you to run it is what I meant.
For me to run it, the first part, it's similar to both of them. I like to have just like a vibe of the thing, and just have this like identifying, like this set of elements, like aesthetic elements, that just like make up the overall theme of the adventure. So for that one, it was insecurities. Insecurities were just like the driving force of it. The theme of it. It was just like, you have this villain who is just like turning other people's insecurities against them and feeding off of this, and that's such a cool concept. And we can also like have fun with that, with the players and their characters' insecurities. So that was like my main incentive for doing that, was I want to mess with my player characters' insecurities. I want to, mess them up with that. So there's that, and then there's just like building a little aesthetic to it. Like, I'm thinking, okay, now we're going to like high like aristocracy kind of thing, and I don't know how much this relates to it, but I think a lot of times that it would be really interesting when first starting to prepare an adventure or prepare a mini campaign to take some time to, rather than thinking about plot, try to think of the game as a as a designer. I'm not saying as a game designer. I'm saying like as a designer, like as an interior designer or as like a graphic designer or this kind of thing, and just take some time to figure out the flavor, the vibes, the music you're going to be using, because they all build this atmosphere, and I start from the atmosphere and then I figure out the plot. For this, big revelation here. The orchid heist isn't actually a heist. It's a mystery. Because I think I'm incapable of writing anything other than mysteries, but the orchid heist starts with a heist and then eventually realize, oh, Val tricked me again. It's actually a mystery. But if I'm building a mystery, I start from the end. Just what is the conclusion that players need to reach? And in that case, like, it's just like there's so many things to figure out, that she's a hag, that like everything is trapped there, that like but then starting from that conclusion, I'm just like going through trying to figure out like all the different conclusions that players need to reach, making clues for each of them, and just like dropping them little by little in there.
Let me try to spin it out. So you started with we would call this like a capital T theme. You wanted to play with insecurity. You wanted to engage the players in that way. You moved from there to tone and atmosphere, and you chose the setting and the dressing and the music and the aristocracy theme because it reinforces your first step. And then you went from there to, we had a little sidetrack about mysteries and heists in the middle. And now we're back to, then the plot arises from that. You're thinking about what are the plot points that could serve that atmosphere, which in turn serves the theme.
Yeah. I guess there's always like an initial like general thought about like, oh, like I want to run a game about like some creature corrupting people who are just like nice people, and I want it to be like true crime, and I want to have a bunch of like dead bodies wound up in the river. So start from a general thing, but like it's not like plot yet, because I haven't yet plotted out any of it. I just know this is the general basis of it, and then I'm going to move on to tone, more like it, and to atmosphere, and think, okay, I want this to be true crime. How do I make this feel true crime? What kind of like music, what kind of visuals, what kind of like protagonists could find themselves in a very true crimey kind of narrative. And then once I have that, I find it's easier to plot the adventure, because I mean, if I'm going to write an Over the Garden Wall inspired game, and I know I've already written down windmills and wheelbarrows and a nice barn with strange creatures in it, and then I already have all of these elements to pull from, and it's a lot easier to figure that out. But 5-room dungeon, not my usual. I usually go for more of a 3-act kind of structure. So 5-room dungeon was a bit of an experiment, but here it was like the heist has to start with the planning, because that's genre, right? It has to start with the planning. It has to end with the confrontation, because that's what people expect from an adventure, and that's what your climax is going to be. And then everything in between is just like a skill challenge. It just like takes you from one room to the other, or like from 5-room dungeon, but the Orchid Heist has so many more rooms, and at every time you cross one of these tiers, cross one of these thresholds, the tension resets. You've had like a mini climax up until you make it through that threshold, and then it goes down. You've made it inside the staff-only areas, and then like is when it begins to pick up and pick up again until you make it to the lair, and it's just like this constant kind of
right. There's that tension you were talking
tension
about.
resolution. Yeah.
Of course. So that's cool. And so when you run this, when you ran it, and then when you expect other people to run it, they're bringing their own characters to it, right? So is there any kind of work that you feel you need to do to adapt what you already have on the page to the characters? Or is it the other way around?
I think it's the other way around. I mean, I think when I write pre-written adventures, I go with the assumption that I should never assume what players are going to do. And I should assume that the GM is going to take what they want and modify everything else. And I'm only giving like a few likely courses of action and all of that. But the whole like main insecurities thing, like some GMs might just choose not to play with it. I like to include something like that, some kind of way that it's just that in the pre-written module, I'm so used to adventures where who my character is such a huge part of the narrative, and sometimes the GM builds their entire plot line around a character, or just like moves like from one character to the other and makes sure to like have that spotlight be on them, because in the adventures that I play and that I run, the star of the adventure is the players, is the player characters. It is not really my plot. But in pre-written adventures, you can't do that because it's a pre-written adventure. So you can't write an adventure for the characters that you don't know exist or not. So I like to just like add a couple of little things in there where characters can really show who they are and have that little moment of spotlights to show what their personality is like. So the insecurities thing was that for Orchid Heist, but in another one it's like in another adventure I've written, it's this whole thing of how protective they are towards children and towards the innocent, and then in this other one it's rivalry and trying to bring in them like feelings of jealousy, of feelings of inadequacy in this very competitive kind of environment. And for anyone who's going to run it, it's take it or leave it. It's there if you want it, but I gotta go with the assumption that any GM running a pre-written module is going to make adjustments to it, because that's what I do. If I'm going to run Curse Strat, I modified the hell out of it.
Unfortunately, we're drawing close to the end of our time, which is terrible because I feel like we have another hour of things to talk about, which just means
Oh
that
my
we'll have
God.
to.
I feel like
we'll have to
I
do
feel
it
like we've
again.
barely scratched the surface. Oh my.
I know.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
so much more we have to hit. And but I do think that it would be good to go back to our laboratories and think about stances, and think about what it would mean for a GM to adopt a different stance in a different situation, and then we'll have something to talk
Yeah.
about next time,
Yeah.
which would be great.
That's, you know what? That's crazy because, like, I mean, I did tell you, I had so many ideas of like things to talk about for this, and I think like I didn't even pull any of them, and I think we just like delve into a thing and just like but I would be really happy to have more talks.
Yeah. It's a good thing we have a timer, because I feel like we could just keep talking and talking for hours.
Yeah,
We
for
need
real.
something to.
But the stances to me seem like this is something to scratch more, to scratch more,
Yes.
to dig more. But you know, it's and another thing I would really love to like have more of a talk about is just like thinking more about the aesthetic of things, because aesthetic is a great element of tone, and I don't mean just in like in building the atmosphere and the vibe just like for you to know as a GM, but also it has a mechanical impact on things,
Yeah.
especially in horror. Like the idea of like a monster being an aesthetic only and never defined thing is the main thing that I go by in horror. Is just building something as something that is never defined is a whole really fun exercise, and the best way to run horror, because then you just don't have to do any other work. You just let people's minds fill in the blanks with whatever
Right, even
terrible
more
thing you can come up
horrifying
with.
if you.
Yeah.
It saves you time
Yeah.
too. Genius.
Yeah.
It saves you time. Just, I mean, why would you put so much effort into something if the human psyche is already amazing at it?
Yeah.
So to encourage it. We have so much to talk about at some point.
Yeah. But for now, since we're wrapping up, we usually like to ask two questions kind of towards the end of these interviews. And the first one is, we talked a lot about narrative-driven games and horror and mystery and stuff. Are there any like games or systems or adventures that you've liked that you feel like people should try out? We talked about Masks a little bit.
We talked about Masks a little bit, and I do think Masks is great if you want to get introduced to to just like these mechanics of role play that are very drama driven and like interpersonal relations between like players and figuring out those dynamics and those dynamics of them and the world around them. And I think it's a great game for that. But I also cannot recommend Dread enough for people who want to run horror but who don't yet know how to do it and who worry that they won't do well at creating that tension, but still want to try their hand at it because practice makes perfect. The game Dread is going to bring the tension without you having to do it, so you get to experiment with horror without worrying about whether you're going to do well. Dread is it's a very rules light TTRPG, and by rules light I mean basically virtually no rules other than you have a Jenga tower and you do actions in the game.
Yeah, the Jenga
It's so good.
It sounded so
Jenga tower
familiar.
game.
I've played
Yeah.
this. It was like 7
Yeah.
years ago, I think.
Really?
Yeah, it was
Oh,
fun.
yeah.
It's a great game. It's like it's I mean, taking things from a Jenga tower is always going to emulate tension in a way that dice never really could. And so Dread is great for like to get into horror and to try your hand at it. But if you're scared that you are still, like not, a bit scared that like you're just dipping your toes, but like you need something else to give like a push to make sure everyone has like a terrifying time, even if you can't bring that terror just yet. It's it's gonna help. But really, really fun game. Yeah, Dread for me. Dread and
Okay,
Masks.
awesome. And
Yeah.
then we talked about horror and suspense and mystery and all this stuff. Are there any, like books, movies, TV shows in those genres or otherwise that you just like or find inspiring that you think people should check out if they like those things?
To look for inspiration, I really like very episodic things like the Magnus Archives or Buffy. This kind of episodic stuff is really, really cool. To just like find inspiration for games, but just keeping an open eye or just like looking at everything that you like as a viewer and how to turn that into TTRPG. Like I've loved What We Do in the Shadows and I'm thinking, how can I turn that into a game? Or I'm trying to write a video about action these days and like how to run action, and realizing that like the scenes I'm the most drawn to for action come from Community out of all places. They have really good action scenes. Like,
Yeah,
for real.
like the paintball episodes. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's or like I'm trying to these days I'm thinking of running a game inspired by the TV show Extraordinary, which is a great show, a slice of life kind of show, but just everyday life and coming of age, like 30-something-year-olds who thinks they're fuck ups, but also everyone has superpowers. And it's a great show, and just everything I watch, I just kind of the TTRPG brain never really turns off. So it's always like, how can I use that in a game? But Buffy, Magnus Archives, anything episodic, great for finding inspiration for games. Oh wait, no, I forgot an amazing one. For horror, Room 1408 is what GMs should be striving for in the pacing of their game.
I don't think I know that one. And based on Jonah's face, I don't know if he does
Yeah,
either.
Never heard
Is
of
it
that.
is it a show or a movie?
It's a movie. It's an adaptation of one of Stephen King's books, and I think it's great. Not just like, because I mean, so many like horror movies are cool, right? But like this horror movie is specifically cool if looking at it from the lens of a GM who's running this game and mastering this pacing of like constantly like back and forth, and also using so much like diversity in the fears that they bring. Like sometimes it's like, I mean, there's like a huge variety in types of fears. Like it's not all like fear of the dark or like scary monsters. Sometimes like fear of losing something you care about. And this movie does really well at just like having a broad spectrum of fears that they pull from, and of just like creating this up and down of tension constantly. So like it's always refreshing and renewing the narrative, and moments of safety really make it hit even harder when moments of fear happen. So Room 1408 is a great resource to look at, and just like with a pen and paper, trying to figure out how the pacing of it works.
You
Awesome.
said the GM's brain never turns off, and I think I know what you mean. You're looking at the story, you're trying to figure out what plot lines you can lift. And I always thought it was funny how you can just steal anything and put it in a game, and the players can't tell. They won't know, even if they've seen it recently. It's great.
For real. I mean, my bad guy in Orchid Heist is a character from Buffy. Like, that's what happened. And like sometimes like you just like you can adapt anything from anything, and it's still going to be 1000% your own somehow, because you're going to just like twist it in some way into a game that's just going to make it entirely different. GM brain, always keep it on. And I could just like be having a talk with my student, and like one of them says something, and I'm like, that's a great line that I could pull off someday.
All right. Well, thank you so much. What's next for you? What are you working on? And also, where should people find you?
People can find me only on YouTube, because I'm bad at social media. I have accounts, I just don't use them.
Us too.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's
yeah.
it's hard. It's hard.
It's hard.
But yeah, people can find me on YouTube. The name of my channel is Corkboards and Curiosities. And what I am working on right now is a video trying to convince people to give it a chance to use a corkboard to have one here to use to write adventures.
Awesome.
Probably I would have responded to your question a lot better earlier if I had just like pulled the corkboard and just like shows you how I do it. I think I should have just done that.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Yeah, great to
Thank you
meet
for having me.